Hello there, welcome back. We've just heard the rather robotic American lady say recording in progress. Um, we are going to be talking today about underrated horror sequels. And I say we because we have a first-time guest who, depending on the way Zoom uploads, is either there or there. And it's John. Hello, John.
Hello, David.
Nice to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
But no problem. So John and I have been talking for somewhere between with at least 6 months up to 20 years or somewhere in that we don't quite know, but at least 6 months. Probably not 20. Okay. A bit longer than 6 months, we think. And one of the very first things we connected over was horror films. Well, it was the first thing. And I said to John eventually, why don't you come on? Um, what kind of things would you like to talk about? And John, like a lot of us on here, is an old school horror fan, and horror sequels was an idea that John had. So again, welcome, John. Do you want to give us a little bit of an overview of your tastes or your why you thought horror sequels would be an interesting idea?
Yeah, so I think as time ticks by and we get a bit older, we kind of there are certain films out there that I feel that are getting left to the wayside and people aren't really talking about them much. And personally, I think some of the best sort of best films out there, especially when it comes to sequels,
Mm-hmm.
the I usually I spend a bit of time online and I see so much hate for certain movies and I just can't understand it. And I do my bit to defend these movies. And to cut a long story short, my taste in horror is very eclectic. I like anything from Hammer to Amicus to Network to out to late 70s, early 80s slashers. I think slashers is my number one forte. That's what I know more about.
Mm.
But let's be perfectly honest here. I like a broad range of horror films. I like everything from the sublime to the ridiculous.
Yeah.
I really appreciate films that don't take themselves too seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And in the same breath, I like films that really have some thought in them. And one thing that I do find myself really enjoying is watching films which I know people don't like, and really finding some value in it in the
Mm.
hidden things,
Yeah, which is you said from the sublime to the ridiculous, and I like to think those are the best types, both of those. Because when you get right in the middle, you get safety.
Yeah,
I think that safety is the worst thing about movies. When you are just aiming to offend nobody, to play it as safe as possible, you're going to get the most base audience, and you're never going to do anything even remotely interesting. Um, just you, indifference is the enemy of art, and horror films when they get to that real middle of the road, oh, I just have no time for them. It's
yeah,
such an easy genre to get wrong, but it's the cheapest genre to do anyway. So that's why we have so many that are stuck in the middle.
yeah. I think this is hopefully some of the films I'm going to talk about today. What we're going to talk about, sorry. Um, we're going to stick to sequels, and they're going to be sequels that take what was already established in the first film and they put on the head and do something completely different. And that is what I like about the films we're going to talk about today.
Brilliant. So did you say you have six?
I've got probably more than six here, but
Oh, brilliant. So good. So John said he was going to come up with a list, and he's like us folks, physical media. So he's got props as well. So I don't know what's in John's list. I've got a rough idea of a couple. Don't get me wrong. But we're just gonna. You're going to be seeing it at the same time as that. Well, not literally the same time because we're recording this at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. But John, where do you want to start? Take us away.
well, let's start really with something that completely changed what the first movie did. Don't get me wrong, I love the first movie. We're going to talk about House, specifically House 2, Second Story.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Arrow edition. Yeah.
So I recently watched this again because I wanted to really get a feel for it, especially since I knew I was going to talk about this because I first came across House in the early 90s, and I loved it. I've always loved House, and I never knew there was a House 2 until the late 90s, and I thought I'd give that a try, and it was completely so different than House, the first House was, and I knew I knew a lot of people didn't like it, and I didn't understand why, because I just thought it was a film full of charm and fun, and I personally enjoyed it.
Yeah. And it rides the perfect line of, well, the first one was already a little bit goofy, you know.
Yeah, it was
taking the Vietnam villain back from the dead who looks over the top. So you may as well do something even goofier, because you can't go more serious once you've already started with that. And we get the what's it called? The old cowboy who comes back, and instead of making him the villain, he's the hero of the piece.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about House 2 and what it actually is. Well, its tagline is the second story.
Mm-hmm. Must have taken them all day to come up with that tagline.
Yeah, and the blurb for House 2, second story is, as it says on the title there, says it's getting weirder, and it really does get weirder.
Yeah.
To the stars in House 2, second story, Jonathan Stark, who you might know from Fright Night as Jerry Daniels' henchman.
Mm-hmm.
He's quite. I always liked him anyway. He's a good actor. Also, a pre Mel Brooks movies, Amy Asbeck,
mm-hmm.
who was surprised to see, and if you know your 80s horror, you'll be well aware of another star that's in here, who Royal Dano,
mm-hmm.
who's got the makeup this time. So he's always a pleasure to see on any movie.
Yeah. Royal Dano's filmography is one of those that's like from the 40s, like millions and millions and millions of movies. Like,
he's got a really distinctive voice.
Yeah.
He's quite clearly a guy who enjoyed being ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You can catch him in other films equally ridiculous, like Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But was the old guy shouting at clouds.
Yeah. And House 2 also has, and I'm glad you didn't mention, so I can jump in, John Ratzenberger from Cheers.
Yes.
Cliff Clavin, which is so weird that we have the double Cheers connection in the first two House films. Because George Wendt was the comedy relief, if you like, in the first one, was the neighbor. So you've got Norm and Cliff in the first two House films. And John Ratzenberger's, he's only in it for one scene, but he's hilarious as the handyman, who you think he's going to be like, oh, what the hell's going on here? It's turned into a horror movie and I'm out my depth. He's seen it all before. This does not, a dimension into hell does not faze him at all. A portal into hell. He's seen it. It's brilliant.
It's like, I like to think that him and George Wendt will film Cheers one day and they think, oh, I'm going to do this film. Just have fun with it. Just have fun with it.
Yeah, I like to think they were thinking, do you think we should get another one for part 3? Although there wasn't really a House 3, was there? Because it was the horror story, and then they just called it House 3 afterwards.
Yeah.
Which apparently Lance Henriksen was quite shocked to discover he'd made a House movie. He didn't know. But yeah, you can imagine them thinking, if these keep making money, we might get Ted Danson or Shelley Long one of these days. but yeah, working their way through the cast. As you say, it's a really fun one. It ramps up the goofiness without being stupid, which is another thing that I like about a horror sequel. When it can be silly but not stupid, because they're two similar but not the same things. And we also get a really nice ending. It feels like they actually conceived a good place for it to go and work towards it, rather than just finish it, just kill the bad guy and end it. They actually came up with quite an offbeat, strange, quirky ending, which we won't spoil, but it is there.
I think when I recently revisited House 2, one of the things that really stuck out to me, it's been before recently. It's been a long time since I actually watched House 2, and it could have been a couple of years, to be honest. But one thing that really stuck out to me is how much, especially at the beginning, how much it feels like weird science.
Yes, there is that kind of, it's happening on an like our reality, but ramped up to where silliness is almost the normal level. There's an accepted level of goofiness that just exists as the base level in that reality.
Well, I think if I didn't know if I didn't know anything about House 2 and someone told me this was a John Hughes movie, I would have been, oh, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, even the fact that it's in a bit, because John Hughes movies almost always took place in a big house.
Yeah.
For some, because he grew up in one and thought that's how everybody lived. John Hughes did not know how to write for working class families in a small cramped apartment. So that's why every Home Alone family house is a mansion, for God's sake. It's ridiculous. But yeah, so yeah, House 2, really fun, over the top, but never stupid. And it is funny. It's not just one of those, they made a movie and now we can laugh at it. You are laughing with it.
No, I think one of the things that I appreciate about House 2 and why I always never understood hate for it is because it's a movie that, as I said at the beginning, it knows it was made to be silly. There's some slapstick humor in it. There's the special effects department were fresh off of Return of the Jedi and Gremlins. So you've got all that there. There's no real scares. There's no tension at all whatsoever. It's a movie that wanted to be a comedy in the first instance, and it's just, I find a lot of charm in that personally.
Yeah, that's a brilliant first one. Take us on to number 2, John.
Hey?
Take us on to number 2.
Number 2.
Your next pick.
Let me just carry on the films that were completely different than what the original did, and then this one arguably, I don't know about you, but I see a lot of hate for this online, and I personally love it because I know, just like House 2, it's played, a lot of it's played for laughs, and we know it, and that is Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2.
Yes, and again from Arrow. Yep. Yes, you do see a lot of hate for that online because obviously it follows one of the most gritty, pervasive horror films of all time that is shockingly violent if you don't go back and actually look at the violence, because you don't see any violence in the film. But you think you have. It's the most bizarre thing, and it really feels like you've seen a lot more than you ever do in the first one.
I think that's one of the genius things about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, in Tyler, is the very name. Texas, it brings upon instantly an image of, oh, this film's going to be full of gore, but in reality, the film is very little gore in it.
And if the first one had been released with that name 10 years later, would have been that, no doubt. But coming 10 years earlier, yeah. So following it with a sequel, you can't you can't do that again, but you can. We've seen that in a million movies. You can just do that again. That's the number one favorite thing to do, is just do that all over again. But Toby Hooper didn't want to, and he kind of was forced into doing that movie because it was the only way he could get funding for Life Force. By doing that, Cannon wanted Texas Chainsaw 2, so he decided to just take it in a totally different bonkers direction.
Yeah, I mean, again, you can't really, and you shouldn't really try and replicate what works so well in the first movie, because you can't. It's Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's arguably one of the still to this day one of the greatest examples of horror you're ever going to come by. And to me, why not have a bit of fun with it?
Yeah.
You know, you've got some great actors in there. You got Caroline Williams. You got Dennis Hopper. Dennis Hopper, fantastic. Bill Moseley as Chop Top. I mean, endlessly.
You'll never look at a coat hanger the same way.
Yeah, well, one of the things about Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 that I truly feel every time I watch it is, we're, you know, especially with dialogue that Bill Moseley comes out with, is we are all chopped up in that film.
Oh, I can almost feel
incoming mail.
Yeah, I mean, it's dumb, it's over the top, but it's fully aware of all those things. It uses Leatherface for his full comic potential.
Yeah.
And a lot of people obviously don't like that, because you're taking something that was a terrifying icon and you're using it in a funny way. But why not? Nobody's coming to your house to take the first film off your shelf. So you know, the second one doesn't make the first one better or worse, and there's no point in just doing it over again. It happened again, as we've seen from further movies. They will just try and do the tone of the first one again, and it never works as well as just doing something bonkers like number 2.
No, I think it's just one of the films that just it takes what, you know, completely changes what worked in the first film and makes just a really comfortable, enjoyable, ridiculous, fun ride. And I generally enjoy it. Every time I watch it, I enjoy it even more.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, there's people hate it for what it is, but I'm not one of them people. I think it's just ridiculous, fun, and sublime all at the same time for me.
Yeah, and it's well shot, it's well made, the designs are great, and it knows exactly what it is. I mean, the family have literally got like a secret lair in a mountain. You know, it's so over the top. Yeah, and Dennis Hopper is peak cocaine. Dennis Hopper just going at it full tilt boogie. Nuts. Dennis Hopper versus Leatherface with a chainsaw each. That'll do. That'll do. So what's number 3 on the docket?
Number 3?
Not that they're in any order, but yeah.
Well, again, let's preface this by saying the original was something that obviously worked well. It's iconic to this day, but I think this film in general, over the years, especially since it's been released, the older it gets, the more accepted it's becoming. And without further ado, I'll let you know it's Psycho 2.
Brilliant. Now that is the one that I think we first mentioned when we came up with the topic. So yeah, I mean, I'll just let you go on that one. So give us some Psycho 2 love. So
we we look at we're coming to cycle 2, years after Norman Bates has been put through the system and released again, and he's pitched to be, he's a better person, or so we think. He's trying to hold down a job, and people won't let him forget about his past. And to be fair, I think this film in general, I think if I was in Norman Bates' shoes, I'd revert back to being Norman Bates, because the people he meets where we're trying to work, calling him out all the time. And I think it's a bit of a small character study as well, especially not just by Norman Bates, but the people he interacts with, about how, like, let's be honest, to me, the way I interpret it is about how offenders try to integrate back into society, and how the people around them just won't let them get on with being happy.
Yeah,
that's what I get from it anyway. But I think it's well made. I think they do a lot of good things in this, and I think, if I remember rightly, this is probably one of the Psycho films where there is literally a very small body count, especially for Norman Bates.
Yeah, and it does the intro, because it's directed by Richard Franklin, who gave us like Road Games and stuff. So a guy who knows the genre, film, builds on the original. So this isn't a case of goofiness like the first couple of picks. Deadly serious. I mean, there's some black comedy, definitely, just like there was in the original Psycho, but it's black comedy. It's not goofy comedy. It takes the original and builds around it, but not in a massive blown up way of, massively expanding just literally going down the road. So Norman mentioned a diner in the first one as a throwaway line. That's where he now works. So it literally is just expanding it to down the road. And as you say, it takes, it even brings back Vera Miles as the sister of Marion Crane.
Yeah.
We won't go into there's no point in spoiling these if we're trying to tell people that think they're underrated sequels and they should check them out. But there's some good twists in it. There's some good fake outs in it. But number one, it's just a really well-made drama more than anything else. I
think one of the good things about Cycle 2 as well, like we've just touched upon, is it doesn't try to replicate what worked so great in the first film. It just, like I say, it builds around the structure rather than try to, that works, so we'll do this again. I think one of the first films we see, Meg Tillion as well, she was fantastic in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It had Dennis Farina. Was it him that owned the diner? No, it wasn't Dennis Farina. It was Dennis Franz from NYPD Blue.
Yes.
And he's the main won't let Norman forget kind of character.
Yeah.
Because I appreciate too they didn't do the villagers with pitchforks approach.
Yeah.
They use him almost to be the villagers with pitchforks. So he's the one that's constantly, hey Bates, don't forget to do that. And what's that? You're gonna look at that knife? You're gonna take a shot at me? Just because Norman's working in the kitchen with the knives.
Yeah.
In his diner. And it's a real character study of a character who's already had a film, but it's a completely different character study because he's now been rehabilitated. He's moved on, and we're kind of asked, can he be rehabilitated? Can he move on from who he was? And will society let him anyway? So it really asks you to kind of be the jury for Norman Bates and almost try him for past crimes when he's already paid his dues.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly what I get from it. But personally, won't get into too much politics here, but I always think if someone served their time and it's their time to leave, you know, if they've been let out of whatever penitentiary they're in, I think they served, and you've got to give people a chance. And so I like to think society as a whole tend to do give people a chance, depending on what they've done, obviously. But there'll always be one or two people or a bunch of people there that just won't let it go.
Yeah.
And I think in this film, you can really feel Norman doing his best to walk the fine, like, middle line, and trying to be a good person, and without spoiling too much of it, I think the pressure of that really starts to, especially later in the film, the pressure of that really starts to weigh on him.
Yeah. And Anthony Perkins is brilliant in that film. He doesn't come back as a paycheck. I mean, obviously, I'm sure that was part of it, but he comes. The film was commissioned because we're in the slasher era, and what did Universal have in the vaults that could be resurrected? Oh, we had a film where a guy uses a knife, and that could be fun. Let's do that again. So Psycho gets dusted off. They obviously have the house as a standing thing in Universal Studios, so they just use that again. And Norman, as played by anybody else, could be just a very quirky character that doesn't feel real, but Anthony Perkins gives him a real humanity, and you can sympathize for a mass murderer, which is quite something, because he does get across that Norman Bates was always a nice guy. It was only his schizophrenia or whatever they diagnosed it as, ultimately as bipolar or whatever it may be, that that turned him. But Norman, when he knew he was Norman, was always just a nice kid then guy, and he was never really allowed to be that.
Yeah, I think it's especially Psycho 2, I think it's better received as years go by, because more and more, especially in real life, like, mental health problems are more well diagnosed, and I think there are people, I certainly know people in real life that have these kind of mental issues that they're personally happy with people acknowledging them better. And I think as we say, it's a good character study, because Norman Bates has mental health issues, and for me, he's doing his best to get through that.
Yeah. He's done everything in his power to make himself better. He's worked with the therapist. We hear that he's been a model inmate or patient, I guess, because he was in an institution rather than jail. And it's quite ahead of the curve, I think, that film. In terms of its look at crime and punishment and mental illness and whatnot. It's quite ahead of the curve. And that gets completely thrown away for Psycho 3 just a couple of years later.
Yes, I'd never actually seen Psycho 3 until recently. I think it was the last 2 weeks ago I saw Psycho 3, and I thought, not so great.
Yeah, I mean, it's got its own charms, but the weird thing about Psycho 3 is that Anthony Perkins, if he was bad as Norman in the second one, you could understand it because he's not played it for nearly a quarter century. Yeah. But he's great in number 2. Number 3 is only a couple of years later, and he seems to have forgotten how he played it in number 2.
Yeah.
He's just playing this weird, quirky, like almost Jeff Goldblum talking Norman, the stuttering, stammering Norman. And he'd moved beyond that in number 2. So it's a regressive film. And it's directed by Anthony Perkins as well.
Yeah.
And to me, it comes across as, I'm sure you've seen Crimes of Passions with Anthony Perkins.
Yeah, I was going to mention that next, actually, Crimes of Passion.
Brilliant.
He gets it. He clearly gets typecast.
Yeah.
Anthony Perkins as a psycho, basically. And Crimes of Passion, and what's the other one?
Oh, I know the one. Something of like the one where he's like, on the cover.
Yeah,
Yeah, Arrow released that as well. We know the one.
I can't remember the name.
Edge of Sanity or something.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I've not seen it, so that's probably on the next to view.
Yeah, it's pretty. So I mean, as you say, he's typecast, so he's good at just playing that type. But it felt to me, and in his real life, Anthony Perkins was a notorious. Well, there's no better word than mad shagger.
Top
And,
Shaggy.
and unfortunately, it led to his demise because he caught AIDS doing that. Yeah, guys, girls did not matter. Any old, when I say young, I don't mean young. I mean legal or quite elderly. It didn't matter. He was anything goes with Anthony Perkins.
Yeah, I
think you can see that in Crimes of Passion and Psycho 3 that's actually in his character quite bizarrely.
because let's be honest, whatever age he was never a bad looking man, was he?
Yeah, he had that kind of tanned thing as he got older, where he was like distinguished. And then as a young guy, he was just handsome. Young. It was always a bit too quirky for the mainstream anyway.
Yeah.
Which is why Orson Welles used him in The Trial. He's great in that, but he was always too quirky to be Warren Beatty, Paul Newman, that kind of actor. But it was brilliant as playing. He was ahead of his time again, just playing these offbeat characters. Much missed. And his son's a great director, Oz Perkins. Black Coat's Daughter and Gretel and Hansel. He's done some great movies.
Yeah, they're great.
So yeah. So yeah, Psycho 2 is definitely, that would probably be I think it's the best sequel as a film. Like just as okay, that's the premise. What can I do as a film separate from that? I think it's brilliant. In terms of you don't even need to see the original actually.
No, because it really fills the blanks for you.
Yeah, you just need to know everything it tells you is in the first couple of minutes. Well, he's been released and he did some horrible things back in the day. Obviously, it rewards you if you know the backstory, but it's not essential. So what's up? What's next?
This is your turn now. I think you can take one.
Well, let's see. The problem with doing these lists is you tend to just steal steal what I'm going for. I'm going to go The Exorcist 3.
Oh, we're doing part 3 that way.
Well, just because, why not?
I don't. You know what? Mercifully, I do not want to talk about Exorcist 2. Thank you very much.
Good. Because The Exorcist 2 is the best example of, okay, that was a massive hit. We'll get a big director in, and we'll just try and do something a bit weird again. So we get John Boorman in to direct it after he'd had Deliverance and things. They get Richard Burton in, and nobody knows what the hell that film was about. It's like a bizarre sci-fi film. It's closer to what's it called? Christopher Nolan, Inception. Like dreams within dreams and reality, blah blah blah. Exorcist 3 takes it back to basics because William Blatty himself writes and directs it from his own novel Legion. And it's flawed. I'm not going to say this is a great film start to finish, but it sets up wonderfully the nature of evil itself and manifestations of evil. So people will be quite surprised if you told them that the film is based around the other priest from the first Exorcist. Not Caris, not Met, the other one who's in it, like Caris is talking to for 5 minutes, and the cop that comes around a couple of times in The Exorcist. Those are the main characters in Exorcist 3. So they'd probably be thinking at this point, oh, that's cheap, isn't it, to have those as your main, just because they were in the first one. Would not really, because first of all, you get great actors. So they recast them because they were dead, I think, the originals. But was Lee J. Cobb dead by then? But you get George C. Scott as your grumpy detective, as if he could ever be anything but grumpy in any movie. And George C. Scott is your detective who's investigating more paranormal, weird stuff going on. and there's a new killer who's in jail, and there's some weird stuff happening. Just there's won't say what happens to his friends, the priest, but weird stuff happens. He starts to investigate and realizes, I don't think we're going to be able to arrest this suspect because it's a demon. It's supernatural horror done in the most chilling way, where it's really guttural, and it's like the first Exorcist in that it feels like the essence of evil itself. Where it's not about how many kills there are, it's not about how bloody it is, it's just about it chills you to the bone, just the very nature of it. It really is a dark, depressing, brooding film that has some wonderful iconography in it. It's got a terrible ending, whichever version you watch, unfortunately. The ending lets down the entire film.
Yeah, it really does. And to just, I wanted to get in there that when George C. Scott's in a film, you've fucking watched, because he's fantastic.
Yeah,
everything. I've never seen a bad film with George C. Scott in it.
Yeah, and he's especially that era, you know, where he almost grew into his grumpiness, because he had it even as a younger actor, and it's like he was waiting to become 60, you know. So from like The Changeling onward, or even Patton onwards, that's kind of peak George C. Scott for me, where he grew into that grumpiness, and it's why he's great as Scrooge. You know, some people don't like the idea of an American Scrooge, but he's great as Ebenezer Scrooge because you can believe George C. Scott as Scrooge. But The Exorcist 3 takes the premise of demons. It never uses the bloody word Pazuzu, so bonus points for that. It doesn't feel like it needs to explain itself. It doesn't feel like it needs to do anything linear. It gives you a feel and a vibe more than it does a plot and worry about A to B to C to right through to Z. It's haunting in a completely different way than the first one is. I was talking to someone last night about our favorite version of the first film. Do you like the director's or the theatrical cut? And to me, the extended cut is the best of the first because of that one scene where Father Merrin and Father Karras are on the stairs. They're kind of on like different landings on the stairs. And Karras says, "Why this girl?" And Merrin says something like, I think the point is to make us despair, to take away hope and have us have nothing left and believe that there's no goodness left in the world. And that very much is the feeling of Exorcist 3. It's the end of goodness. It's almost like a John Carpenter, like one of his apocalyptic movies, like Prince of Darkness or something, or in the Mouth of Madness. It feels more like that than it does the original Exorcist. And it's a great expansion of the franchise without feeling like a franchise film.
Yeah. It's it completely does what. Yeah, because it turns it on its head and does something completely different again, which we like. And if you can't take our word for it, it's Jeffrey Dahmer's favorite film. So
yeah. Yeah, so and you're right. So it almost uses the filter of movies that you've seen throughout the 80s, and uses them as the basis. So we're not just going to get another little girl. We're going to have a serial killer. So you're not going to feel sorry for a serial killer like you would Reagan. It's Brad Dourif doing peak Brad Dourif. Phil Dourif. Never go Phil Dourif. But he's phenomenal in that film. He's another actor who he just needs to turn up and he's always on. You know, it doesn't matter if you see him in the lowest budget nonsense. Brad Dourif keeps your attention.
He does. I mean, everything he's ever in always ends up stealing scenes. I mean, even someone as low key as Wormtongue in Lord of the Rings, whenever he's there, you're watching.
Yeah, and he's even like Lord of the Rings, as you say, he's perfect as that. It's word in your ear, literally. You know, he's slimy Wormtongue is there. He's not a physical threat. He's never Jason. He's never Michael, but he's a different kind of horror. I mean, he's perfect for this kind of stuff, which is so bizarre when you go back and see like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. There he is. But yeah, he's a phenomenal actor. Wise Blood's one of my favorite. Where he's him and Harry Dean Stanton. He's a preacher who's just out to con people into medicals and things. Good satire on organized religion. Shall I pick another one?
Yes, that's it.
Now I'm going to go with this one, and again, I don't think this is a great film, but you've taken the greats. But I think this is an example of a film where I actually don't really care for the original at all, and I do like the second one. So this is an example of, I think it's a masterpiece. It's more, I'd actually just watched this and never watched the first one ever. Devil's Rejects. Devil's Rejects from Rob Zombie. And I do not really care for Rob Zombie at all. House of a Thousand Corpses, no thank you. I've seen The Funhouse by Tobe Hooper, so I don't need House of a Thousand Corpses. I don't like what he did with Halloween. I don't like The Lords of Salem. But for Devil's Rejects, he did pick up on the idea of, I can't just do the first one again. What shall I do that's completely different? So he takes your villains from the first one and turns them into likable anti-heroes, even though they're still doing the most despicable things.
Yeah. No, that's one of the things that always really stuck out to me in Devil's Rejects is this family of people. Despicable. They're the kind of people that are dangerous. You do not want to be mixing with them, but my God, you love them for the whole film.
Yeah, and Bill Moseley never is likable, but you put him in the family scenario and you like the family enough that you just roll with that, because he's the one that is testing your limits of like, I really want to hate all these people. Nasty.
There's a really nice scene in it, a family scene where all him, Spaulding, and I can't remember what his name of his wife is.
Sherry Moon Zombie,
they're in the car and they want ice cream, and there's a little, she's putting ice cream in his face, and it's like what you do with your own family, but between after that, they've done some disgusting things, and it's just like, you're making me like these people. Stop it.
Yeah, it gives them a relatability, because like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, they are a family. They're a dark, twisted, evil family, but now we're seeing them as the protagonists. And we're presented with who should be the hero of the film as the I can't remember if he was a sheriff or U.S. Marshal or whatever, but his brother was killed in the first one. He's been chasing this family down, and instead of presenting him as the hero, he's presented as being as if not more unlikable than the family themselves. So it's almost daring you to ask, who do you want to win here? The serial killers, or the cop who will go to the same lengths? He will torture people, he will murder people. How does that make him any better?
I'm glad you brought up Delirious up, because but any chance to get top like this, I'm going to say it, because one of my favorite characters in the whole film. We all, people our age know who she is, but the mother of the clan, she's fantastic. Leslie Easterbrook.
Yeah,
we were from Police Academy, but she plays an amazing part. The whole her little bit in the cell with the sheriff.
Yeah,
that to me, that is, of all the scenes in that film, that's the scene that I'll always remember, because she literally goes full tilt and just gives a performance of her lifetime.
That is a perfect example of how you can build sympathy for characters that you should not have sympathy for, because it isn't Norman Bates. It's not. He just needs the right care. These people are very happy to be murdering, very happy to be doing what they're doing. And I didn't even bother with the last one, I know they made, what was it called? So
Beat from Hell. I do have it. It's
yeah,
all right.
it's one of those where, do you ever have this where you just, you know the premise, and then you hear something like, as I did, Sid Haig was too ill for this one, so he's in it for 20 seconds and they had to film him in his house and things. And you think, no, I don't want that. It's too depressing just to even think about that. Like,
Yeah,
I'll kind of leave it where I know that I like it. So we had a franchise where I didn't care that leads into a film, and I think I went to see it on like a date night or something. It wasn't because I wouldn't have gone out my way to see that at all. And it was just like, wow, this was better than the first. In fact, I think the best thing they did was call it The Devil's Rejects and not House of a Thousand Corpses 2 or something, because it is a standalone film.
yeah, and also massively, I can't listen to Freebird in the same bite again.
Yeah, I mean, I can't listen to that mostly anyway because it's one of the most overplayed songs ever. But that is like the perfect use of it, because of course that would be the one song that they like, that they would go out, yeah, Bonnie and Clyde style, until the last one. I'll try and think of another one now. See, even what he did with Halloween, his Halloween 2 was, I don't think it was good, but it was at least different. He didn't just remake Halloween 2.
Yeah.
I mean, it was mental, it was bonkers. It wasn't good though. So I'll go with a film that I take a lot of flack for loving, and I don't love it in any ironic sense. Alien Alien 3, I think, is the best Alien sequel. I like it more than Aliens. And a lot of people say, oh, but clearly Aliens is better than even the first one. Well, I like low-key horror. So Alien is a haunted house film in space. There's one creature, it's a threat. We don't have any way of destroying it because it will, you know, if we shoot it and blah blah, it will bleed through and the ship will blah blah blah. And the second one, yeah, there's fun stuff. There's iconic moments. There's Bill Paxton. There's Newt. There's blah blah blah. But it just becomes a video game of, all of a sudden there's 50 xenomorphs coming towards you, and
Yeah.
And that's just not exciting for me. So number 3 takes it back to its roots, but still flips it. So instead of having the rough and tumble space crew that you can identify with, the space truckers, if you will, all of a sudden you're on a planet of literally the most despicable people that you can imagine, because it's a planet of murderers and rapists.
Yeah.
And it challenges you on that. Again, it kind of pushes you to sympathize for these people, because you have a scene where Ripley. So another reason, obviously, why people hate this film is because it completely shits on the ending of Aliens by killing off Newt and Michael Bihn's character straight away. But to me, that's part of the tragedy of Ripley. She can't have a good life. It has to go this way. She is the lone survivor. She wakes up and she's on a planet of rapists. It's another bad day for Ellen Ripley. We have a great scene where she is being attacked by a band of them and she's going to be raped. And Charles S. Dutton's character saves her. And
Yeah.
she goes to thank him. And he says, don't thank me, sister. I'm a raper and a killer of women. And you're like, oh, Christ. So even the hero character in that point is just told you he's a rapist and a murderer of women. It doesn't just say murderer, a murderer of women. So he is a horror character from another film. There could be a prequel about his adventures. And he's the most heroic of the whole bunch apart from Ripley. So it really asks you to kind of say, do you want to root for them? It's kind of challenging you to they're not cool space marines. They're not saying these fun quippy lines. They are evil. They are nasty. They're still being picked apart by xenomorphs. Who are you rooting for now? Because the xenomorph is just doing what it naturally does. It's not evil. It just is.
Yeah.
Who's the villain? Who's the villain there? Ripley I mean, the thing I always love to point out about Alien in general is that from Ripley's point of view, she wakes up, all her cohorts or colleagues are killed. She goes back to sleep. She wakes up and it's 50 years in the future and her daughter's dead.
Yeah.
And everyone she knows in the new future dies as well.
Yeah.
She goes back to sleep. She wakes up. There's another blood alien. And then she dies. So Ripley, from her point of view, this all happens in the space of a couple of weeks. It's such a horrible, horrible life for this woman. A miserable existence. But it has to be.
Interestingly enough, for all the, well, especially the first three alien films, everyone that Ripley seems to get close to or seems to have a bit of a rapport with, dead.
Yeah.
Tom Skerritt in the first film.
Yeah, Dallas, and then Charles Dance here. Yeah. Michael Biehn, obviously, we know. The original idea was going to be 4 or 5 sequels, and there was going to be a Space Marine spin-off, and they were going to... I think it worked out for the best, personally, because I do not need everything to be a shared universe as we're now in the era of. But Aliens, to me, or Alien, it's just a simple concept, and you don't need it to be explored. It's why those Prometheus and whatnot... Yeah. I never watched Alien and said, where did they come from? What was their origin? They're there. That's all you need to know.
Yeah.
That's
I mean, they've gone a bit off rails with it, because I think as it stands now in canon, shall we say, the aliens are bioengineered by the predators.
Yes. Yeah. And
why?
And Michael Fassbender helped invent them as well, and it's like, what? Oh, I don't know. Whereas Alien 3 just takes you back to the basic rough sketch of it, where it's one creature, and they can't use... In the first film, it's because they can't use it because his blood will just burn through the ship. In the third film, they literally can't use weapons because it's a planet of rapists and guns aren't available. So how are they have to use their wits, their smarts. They have to become a team, even though they're not a team. They're just, literally thieves, murderers, rapists. And I think it's Sigourney Weaver's best performance as Ripley. I think it's bold. I think she's instantly in charge. There's no moment in that film where you think she's out of her depth. She owns those guys.
Yeah, and especially the props to Sigourney Weaver, because she was shaving her head. I thought it was cool.
Yeah. She could, and I think they gave her extra money for that. But still, you're right. That was before.
G.I. Jane before.
I mean, it was after Sinead O'Connor, I suppose. So maybe she thought she would get the Sinead O'Connor crowd. But then Sinead O'Connor went pretty toxic quite fast for reasons that Sinead O'Connor was proven very right on. But still, so I think Alien 3 just is a fascinating way of doing actually the same premise as the first one again, which normally I criticize movies for, but twisting it. So not subverting it, but just twisting it enough. So this time, who is the good guys here? There are no good guys. And Ripley, it's no spoiler to even say that she dies at the end, because we know there's alien resurrection. So obviously she's resurrected.
Yeah. I think one of the interesting things about especially Alien 3 is that the one thing she needs help from more than anything else is an android, when she puts Bishop back together, but that's one thing she doesn't want any part of, is dealings with androids.
And I know that David Fincher obviously disowned the film, but to me, it's still a wonderfully made film. He didn't half-arse it just because he wasn't enjoying the process. And it's wonderfully operatic. That whole last act, where it's all taking place around the furnace, when Weyland actually turns up, and he's got the camera crew and things. They want to make it into a propaganda piece, but really it's just so they can get the alien home, as they've been trying to for 3 movies now. and weaponize it. That scene of her throwing herself into the furnace and she's doing the messianic pose while she's doing it is gorgeous. The music swells. It is just beautiful. It's the perfect end to the Alien saga. Unfortunately, I had another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 films.
Yeah, I think one of the good things about Alien 3 as well is the aesthetic. Really, the aesthetic. I find a lot of films, if you can associate a film with a single color, I think you've got the aesthetic right. I think Alien 3 is brown.
Yeah,
copper. It's that's the aesthetic it went for, and if you ask me, Alien, first Alien is white. The second film is blue, and this one is just brown, and brown's quite a telling color to the actual. The actual message it sends.
Yeah, to where the story is going. It's Ripley's descent into hell, literally, literally and figuratively. And it's a tragedy. It's the end of a tragic story of this woman's life and her sacrifice to stop this, as she's been trying all along, to stop this bloody alien getting back to Earth. I mean, the first thing we see Ripley do of any note in the first one is try and stop Ash from getting back in without breaking quarantine.
Yeah.
And if they had have stopped that in the first one, the whole thing would never have happened. The whole franchise.
Yeah.
So her last act, or what should have been her last act, is a perfect full circle. She finally got to stop it getting back to Earth. Until they start just saying the aliens were here all along anyway, and they were with the Predators and blah blah blah.
I think there's a sorry to go on like this, but there's a little like hint of story there where arguably you could say that, especially after the second film and the third film, that's basically twice that Ripley's been robbed. Well, all of them really. She's been robbed of being a mother.
Yeah, literally, and figuratively, so again, she's a tragic character. I just don't know why people want a happy ending for her. There is no happiness for her. That's the kind of tragedy of the character, which I just love. I think it's great to leave it there. And I don't need her and Winona Ryder finally getting back home to Earth to cap it off. I don't think that adds anything. But yeah, so do you want to take us into your last little batch then? We'll go through them a bit faster.
Yeah. Let's have a look. I'm going to go for a ridiculous one. Completely ridiculous. Well, the first film was ridiculous. The second film was ridiculous, but for quite different reasons. But I'm going to go completely off kilter, and not so much horror, or it could be a little essence of horror. But I love this film. I loved it since the first time I saw it. I saw it. Do you remember the TV channel called Bravo back in the day?
Yeah.
I caught it on Bravo one day, and I was glued to it, and I loved it ever since. And I'd like to just reveal that it's Return of the Killer Tomatoes.
Oh wow! I did not expect that one.
I wanted to put something there that didn't expect.
That's the one with George Clooney, isn't it?
Yes, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes was a ridiculous film. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
It never took itself seriously. It was a joke basically, and this to me, this film is full of so many clever jokes and in jokes in it. This film was breaking the fourth wall before breaking the fourth wall was cool.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've seen it recently.
No, not for a long time.
But there's it's a ridiculous joke, and there's a scene in it when George Clooney's character's making a pizza and he throws the dough up in the air, and to some people they just forget that he's throwing pizza up in the air, and it comes back down at the end of the film, and it's like, oh yeah, It's just little things like that that really, really I enjoy. And John Aston's in it as well. John Aston.
Love John Aston. What I do remember about it is the first film obviously is a parody of 50s B movies anyway.
Yeah.
But then the second one is almost like a spoof of the idea of doing a parody.
Yeah.
Like it ramps it up even further. So instead of being a subtle parody where they play it straight, but it's giant tomatoes, they're essentially parodying things like Night of the Lepus, I guess, where so it's not an enemy that should be scary at all. I mean, Night of the Lepus, they called it Night of the Lepus because it's about killer rabbits, giant rabbits.
Yeah.
And they thought Night of the Rabbits wouldn't sell, so they called it Night of the Lepus to give it the scientific name. So it's really a parody of those movies that have monsters that shouldn't be scary and aren't scary in the slightest, so tomatoes will do. And then the second one just kind of parodies sequels to those kind of movies almost.
Yeah. I think one of the things I like about it is there's a whole sketch in there where they stop the film, the director stops film like on camera and will run out of money, and they start product placing throughout the rest of the film, and it starts off being like really heavy, but as it goes on it, they make it more subtle and subtle, and it's just really, I just find it really clever. Like for instance, like it gets to a point where they make a kind of not so obvious, but they start like taking like zooming shots of the footwear where they've got Nikes on and stuff like that. It's just little things like that that really, I personally really appreciate it. Yeah. George Clooney, with his mullet, obviously. I find it sad that he wouldn't even entertain the fact that he was in this, but I find it really clever and just a great time. And if anyone's yet to see this film, I highly recommend it because it's bonkers for all the right reasons.
I must admit, I hate that too, where someone just almost denies they were ever involved.
Yeah.
The best example would be Texas Chainsaw: The Next Generation, where you have Matthew McConaughey and Renée Zellweger, and both of them refuse to talk about the film. People are prepped in advance of what they will and won't talk about when they go to these press junkets, and that is literally a Matthew McConaughey's press junket rider that he doesn't talk about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah,
as if TMZ News are going to ask him about that anyway. But it's like, God, well, return the check then. Did you get the money back? I'm sure you were happy when you weren't getting any bloody work.
Of course, yeah. I mean, why run out these things? Because there's people out there who still appreciate these small films, and he's done it, so he didn't pay for it. It should work.
Yeah. God forbid people should be just happy to have work. They forget when they were hungry. That's the problem. That also has the Killer Tomatoes has the bizarre thing of being from that trend where R-rated films were being turned into children's Saturday morning cartoons.
Yeah,
we had that. We had RoboCop. We had Rambo.
Rambo. Yeah,
Police Academy. We're all becoming Saturday morning cartoon shows, which is just what? And Attack of the Killer Tomatoes loses the joke entirely if you do that, because that is a kid's kind of premise. If you play it as a kid's show, the joke is to not do it as a kid's thing. You do it as a perfectly straight thing. Well, yeah. Anyway, so what's up next?
So I'd like to say that although we're trying, we talk about sequels that deserve another look. I think this one deserves another look. It's not better than the first movie by a long shot, but it does something a little different. And I won't show what it is just yet, but I will say that I'll say something that you'll know what it is. I could have done without the dog flashback. The Hills Have Eyes Part 2.
Yeah.
So this film is, I think it was another Wes Craven film.
Yep.
Where he made it because he wanted to make money to fund another film.
Yeah.
I don't think he really put a lot of work into it. I think some of the plot lines are full of holes, and for some reason they bring back Michael Berryman, but no one's complaining about that because always with Michael Berryman. Yeah, I think it does something a little different. It carries on Ruby's story.
Yeah.
But as much as I quite like the film, I don't think it really works.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if you haven't seen it, it's worth seeing.
Yeah.
And yeah, dog flashbacks, why?
And famously it just ran out of money. So they stopped. They didn't say like, let's try and get some more funding, let's see if we can get some sponsorship, let's do something. They just ran out of money. And Wes Craven did it after Elm Street was shot, which I guarantee you 6 months later, once the money rolled in from that for New Line, he would not have been doing Hills Have Eyes 2.
No.
And it had a tiny theatrical run comparatively. And it's one of those where the behind the scenes story almost makes it more interesting once you start to kind of follow the stories of what goes on, because you're right, it's like it's almost out of place for that to come out in 1984. It just feels so late in the game,
You make a good point. If he'd have waited 6 months, that film would never have seen light of day.
Yeah. He'd made Elm Street, but it hadn't come out yet. So if he'd have known how big that was going to be, there's no way he would have been doing another Hills Have Eyes. Yeah. So what's up next?
I think everything my pal here we've covered. I do have one, but it's pretty much the same as the first film. But
well, that brings us full circle, so let's do it.
Yeah. So we're gonna talk about Creature 2 for a little bit.
Oh, right, okay. Because I might not be with you on this one. This might be the one where we.
The one where what? Sorry.
Where we might go different on this, because I don't like Creepshow 2 very much.
No, I don't.
Oh, good.
Well, I do, but I don't. I think Creepshow 1. Let's be honest. Creepshow 1 was fantastic. I love. It's a rare look at Leslie Nielsen in a villainous role. I think he didn't play villain nearly enough.
Yeah.
Because he was so effective. Ted Danson, great. The stories in Creepshow 1 were fantastic. Creepshow 2, I think it's a good film. But it's just not as effective as the first one. I think the first one really gets the feeling of a comic book come to life, right? Right. Even though this one's got the animated sequences, the things that I really miss in this film are the lighting,
the lights, exactly, the flashing and the purple background, the
Dario Argento lights, basically.
Like Dario Argento meets comic book and ramped really high up. So I mean, when in the first one, when they open finally the chest, or with the creature in it, and Adrian Barbeau and Hal Holbrook, and you get the wonderful stuff. And I don't know why they have never brought that back in a Creepshow thing. I think they did in the TV show, an episode or two, but even then they didn't do it for. To me, that should have been the Creepshow signature. Was those moments.
I personally think if someone had the money to go back to this film and just add the lighting to the exclamations, it'll be a much better film for it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a fascinating one for that reason. And obviously the stories weren't constructed to have those kind of moments quite as much as I think the reason they say in the documentary why they didn't decide to do them. But to me, pick different stories then, because that's one of your real selling points was it
Yeah,
didn't just feel like another anthology film. It felt like specifically Creepshow, specifically um, a tribute to EC Comics and that kind of stuff. So literally going comic book for just a few seconds, but then going straight back into proper, well, rather heightened drama, but still dramatic moments kind of makes
yeah,
that film. And then having it filmed relatively straight for the rest of it, but then these ridiculously over the top shock moments is what makes Creepshow. It's not about the animation parts. It's
no,
not
not to that. I
not
think to me it feels too much like a extended episode of Tales from the Dark Side.
yeah, exactly. The reactions, the big color gel reactions, are what you need to differentiate it from Dark Side, from um, Tales from the Crypt, from all. I mean, we had a million of them in the UK in the 70s and 80s, and Tales of the Unexpected and all that kind of stuff. Thriller, um,
I'm a House of Horror.
yeah, Hammer House of Horror, obviously, yeah, so many. So you need something to say this is why they can't just be, these couldn't be in those films, and those moments are my ultimate example, because the comic book parts, the animations, they could easily just be the wraparound in any anthology films, where they would
Yeah,
where the cast were all huddled together and seeing their fate, and then you get the twist at the end that, oh my goodness, it was the devil all along, all that stuff. Yeah. Who was the dad in the first one in the wraparound sequence? It was
uh, wasn't it not? I'm embarrassed. I forgot his name completely.
isn't it from Return of the Living Dead and Nightmare on Elm Street 2? Or am I making that up? The dad, Jesse's dad in Nightmare on Elm Street 2. Oh God, I'm forgetting his name.
It's Night of the Creeps, isn't it?
Oh, you're right. It's Tom.
Tom Atkins. Yes, of course it is. I'm embarrassed because I've got Tom Atkins's autograph and everything.
Yeah, Tom and a mustache.
Yeah,
I
kill
suppose
me.
like Tom Selleck as well, but yeah, must have been something going in the water in the 80s with Toms with mustaches.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
coming.
Yeah, brilliant.
I'm,
Tom Atkins was the dad who got his comeuppance. Yeah, that's right. And number two didn't really have that kind of big wraparound.
no, but it was like just animation.
Yeah, quite silent animation, and then it lost the visual flair of those lighting moments. So straight away, it just kind of loses what Creepshow was for me.
Yeah,
And then the stories just go on too long. I think the cigar store Indian one goes on way too long. Don't get me wrong, it's nice to see George Kennedy. He's always a nice warm presence. But the teens going out and then the kind of oily lake thing doesn't work for me too well either.
but that Wrath one's a strange one to me because it always took me out of the feeling that it's a good story. I'm not going to say it's a bad story, but it's a good story. But if you're a teenager and you're stuck on a raft, the last thing you want to do is try and sexually assault the person on the raft with. You're too shit scared to do anything.
Yeah,
That I have to this day I have a problem with that because even when I was young I thought, why is he doing that?
yeah.
That's just
And that could work if you'd have made it more of a parody of these early 80s kind of horror films where teenage boys played by usually actors about 35 years old were just always horny. You could probably have done something with that if
yeah.
you, but they don't play it as satire. They just play it kind of straight, and it falls a bit flat. I mean, the first Creepshow, if you take out those moments, and you take out the wraparound, it doesn't work as well. The Stephen King story wouldn't work as well without the over the top moments. The Adrian Barbeau one certainly wouldn't. The
No.
one, the chest. The bugs one might, because just those bugs are disgusting enough on their own. But
I think for the first film, that's probably the one story that feels a little bit out of place.
yeah,
But it's still a story. But like for me, when I think of Creepshow, it's either Jordy Verrill or
Ed Danson and Leslie Nielsen.
yeah.
But
Ed Harris dancing, yeah.
yeah, it's yeah. Creepshow is a good illustration of anthologies in general, where I can't think of an anthology film where I love all the segments, but that's kind of the point almost.
Yeah.
If you like them all, then they're probably not doing their job, because there should be enough variety for everybody to get something. So if you're not enjoying this one, just hold on 15 minutes. There's a new one coming along.
Yeah.
And again, there's a franchise where I just didn't bother with the third one, because that was one of those, the rights were bought by some Eastern European company, and yeah, no,
yeah. I had the misfortune of watching the third film, and it was truly shocking, but not in a good way.
The only way those kind of things work, because that the same happened to Return of the Living Dead, where 4 and 5 came out in Eastern Europe by Eastern European filmmakers, and just no money, just cashing in on a brand name. And the only way that ever works is if you can somehow get the original actor back, or the original star. So I'd think the best example would be Beyond Reanimator. So that's cheap. It's done in Spain. Everybody's Spanish, obviously. But Jeffrey Combs is there, so at least you've got Herbert West.
Yeah.
It wouldn't work if Herbert West was suddenly played by, Juan Ortiz Cortega. That wouldn't work at all. But yeah, a good discussion for another one. But yeah, anthologies by their very nature, I think there should always be one where you're like, I don't like that one very much, because it makes the other ones just stand out a bit more.
Yeah, I didn't know until recently that it was actually Ghoulies 4.
Yes, and how can you follow up the masterpiece that is Ghoulies 3, Ghoulies Go to College?
That's my favourite one of all of them.
It's just you start talking. Yeah, I mean, that was that period where everybody was trying to cash in on Gremlins, Munchies, and yeah. But I think we'll call it quits there, because we've been going for about an hour and 15, an hour and 20, I think. So we'll call it quits there, and this has been fun.
Yes, it has.
I'm sure we'll come up with more topics, and especially with October around the corner, I'm sure we can come up with a few. So I say around the corner, increasingly so. I don't know where this year's gone. It's ridiculous. Things are
just a side note. As we've spoken about sequels, we didn't even talk about the obvious sequel.
Nightmare on Elm Street
Part 2,
yeah, because we talked about that quite a lot.
We spoke about so much. What we want to say about that's been said between us. So
that's it. We probably thought we'd already covered it. Yeah.
Just for anyone watching, Nightmare on Elm Street 2 is the best sequel. I don't care what anyone says. The best sequel.
And Nightmare on Elm Street 2, it's camp. It's over the top if you want to read it that way. But it's also about a young guy finding himself, which, if you've seen this Scream Queen documentary about the actor, is very much, it's not even subtext. I think it's just text.
Yeah.
The great thing about it is a Freddy film, Freddy's still horrific in it. He's not just doing the Roadrunner Wile E. Coyote Freddy that he would turn into later on. It's not.
Yeah, I think of all films, he's most visceral in this film.
Yeah, and people complain because it breaks the rules. Freddy coming out the swimming pool, for example, and going on a rampage breaks the rules. Rules are meant to be broken. Who cares?
Arguably, when that film was made, there were no rules.
Yeah, and
there were rules.
And they make it up every time Nancy comes back anyway. She's got a different backstory. It's like, is John Saxon alive, dead? Did the mother die in this one? I don't know. So, yeah, it's like the old the Mystery Science Theater theme tune. Just keep telling yourself it's just a show. I should probably just relax.
I actually have a quad poster of Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2 to put up at some point. It's massive. It's going to fill the whole wall up. But that tells you just how much I love that film, because it's just for me, it's just full of new things to process. And I've never got bothered. And arguably, it was my first introduction to Freddy anyway. That's the first film I ever saw.
Yeah,
as Nightmare on Elm Street, so it holds a spot for me anyway. And there we have it. That's our.
That's a good one to just throw in there as a. By the way, go and see that one. Yeah, that's a. And don't bother with the rest of them unless you're just going to have a marathon, because that's probably the best way to see those ones.
Definitely. If you have to skip any, skip 5.
Yeah, but again, those films just work best if it is Halloween time. You, your other half, or a couple of mates just doing a marathon, because only 1 and 2 stand alone as films for me. I wouldn't randomly put on Dream Warriors,
no,
or Dream Child, or even New Nightmare, which was kind of Wes Craven's proto Scream, I suppose, in terms of more meta.
Everybody seems to have a hard on for Dream Warriors these days.
Yeah,
and it's fine. It's just, I just think, I think that's the one where it actually sets up some rules. But I just always preferred Freddy's Revenge.
Yeah, that's my thing. It's like, if the rules only came up in the 3rd film, then they don't count. Like, that means that the 3rd person who got a crack at it decided what the rules were. No, I don't think so.
No, I think also just a shout out to Graham Humphrey's amazing Freddy's Revenge poster for the UK. Oh,
yeah,
that poster. When I first moved to Manchester in '88, there was a video store on a corner for me, and it had Freddy's Revenge poster like on the front of the window, and it used to give me nightmares. I couldn't sleep because it was there, and that fascinated me for years and years. Because of that poster, that is what ignited my interest in horror as a genre. And just it's a lost art. It's a lost art now. Good movie posters, and back in the 80s, horror movie posters just literally sold the film for you.
Yeah, it had to. The cover and the movie poster, because you couldn't just, I mean, when I see like a bus stop now and it's got the poster and it's got a little QR code at the corner, and you can hold your phone up and watch the trailer while you're standing at the bus stop. It's like, you've taken away a little bit of the. I get it. It's marketing, obviously.
Yeah.
You're right. And yeah, we get hoodwinked a lot by wonderful artwork, and then you'd watch the film and it'd be like, where the hell is anything from that artwork?
Yeah.
But that was part of the fun too, like you'd rent a film on the Friday and it'd be like taking it home, taking it back on the Sunday, like, you motherfucker, you've wasted a rental.
Yeah, there was sometimes. I mean, I used to love going to the video shop. Was surrounded in movies, and on occasion you'll pick one that looks fantastic. You get it home and it looks absolutely terrible.
Yeah. I wonder, sometimes the worse the movie, the more they probably put into the poster and the cover, just to, oh crap, we better cover this one up. I remember The Tomb, and it was written as like an Indiana Jones font, like The Tomb. It even had like the color, and the main character had a whip and a hat on the cover. And it was like, oh, brilliant! It's an Indiana Jones film. Rented it. Nobody ever wears a hat. Nobody ever uses a whip. There's no adventure in it whatsoever. Apart from that, it was just like Indiana Jones. Wow. Anyway, John, we'll wrap it up there, my friend. And it's been a pleasure.
Yes, we should do this again soon.
We will do. All right, everybody, you know the drill. Watch soon for more amazing content. It's the best content. There's no better content. Everybody says so. Thanks, everyone.
Good, guys. Thank you very much.